And from the top of West Mountain in Scranton, Pennsylvania, good morning, everybody. This is Libertarian Lou. Tea Party Mike is on the line, 94.3 FM, The Talker, and this is Sanity Check, 888-577-4487, 888-577-4487. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. I understand there's a little snow there in PA, and here in Texas, we don't have snow, but it's chilly. But we had a moment here in Texas last week, which reminds me of kind of a libertarian moment.
Uh-oh.
And yes, and I just want some response. We had a gentleman whose business by trade was a sign maker, but he got tired of the speed traps. He thought it was a complete setup by the government, entrapment in a sense. So he made signs that he held out there warning the drivers of the upcoming doom if they continued to speed, and he was quickly arrested and cuffed.
Wow.
But as it went, yes, he was. As it went to court, the judge found him completely innocent because it is his right as the freedom of speech to hold that sign up. So a victory for the citizens of Texas.
There you
and I thought it was very interesting how we start to do things that normally were outside of our realm of thinking just 10 years ago, Lou. So I find it very interesting that the people of America are starting to say enough is enough, of really, really probably just constantly on the citizenship of this nation where we're always set up for failure, Lou. So one victory for the citizens of the United States of America.
Well, we got to stay vigilant, that's for sure. I do want to warn people, if you're just waking up and in the sound of our voice, take it easy today. The roads are a little slick there, Michael. I'm sure as the day goes on, it'll wear off and it'll be a little easier traveling. But if you're all getting moving this morning, give yourself a few extra minutes. As you know, Michael, or we have in the past, when it gets a little snowy up here, we need to take that hike up the hill to the top of West Mountain, as we say, and that's certainly what I needed to do today. I am flying alone. John DiLiberto is covering a story for the Independent Gazette in Long Island today. They have a big forum down there. I'm looking forward to hearing back from him during the week, and certainly next week, perhaps. Griffin, the Creature of Jekyll Island, that author, is going to be there. We're going to try to get him on our radio show and certainly do an interview with him. For those that are not familiar with the Creature of Jekyll Island, it's all about the creation of the Federal Reserve, and certainly we have talked about that. Michael, you're going to try to cover an event down in Austin today with Gary Johnson, and there's this big Patriot. I guess not the Patriot Connectors. Hello, Patriot Connectors over there in Wayne County. But there is a big Patriot meeting down there in Austin, and Gary Johnson and Ben Swan and Judge Jim Gray are all going to be speaking down there, probably with a host of others. So hopefully after your work, you're off to work today, and you're going to try to make it down there. And certainly Mr. X, who's going to be joining us relatively shortly here today. He was at the National Press Club, covered an event on the NSA. Boy, has he written some stories. It is posted at muckrakernews.com, on Breitbart. Really some groundbreaking stuff. So we are totally swamped today, Michael. I have no idea where to even start. There were so many different subjects last week that we didn't get to cover. Certainly we covered a little bit about who owns our debt. I have been staying up on that this week, and unfortunately none of them. Last week I reached out and I gave kudos to a number of them. Well, this week we're taking some of those kudos back because I still haven't heard about that. Who owns our debt? And I think that's a very legitimate question, and we need to stay on that. If you are out there listening to our sound of our voice, please ask your representatives. I mean, if we don't know who owns our debt, that's a problem, Michael.
Well, it is. And just simpler terms, if you go out for a bank loan and you decide you want to buy a home, you go to the lender and you know who that lender is. But here at the national level, we don't know who the lender is. I'm sure someone does, Lou, but I want to know who's holding our debt, because it sounds like it doesn't affect us because it's the nation's debt. But as we begin to see that we are affected by this huge debt that we've now encompassed due to lack of leadership. And, I had the opportunity last night to sit down with a couple of younger folks. They would be considered the millennials. And they are concerned, Lou, about what they're seeing. And they have, and what is so refreshing, though, they have no allegiance to any particular party. What they have to is an allegiance to their future and the nation's future. So as I look forward down, I begin to think, I heard a statement yesterday on the news where what's going on within the administration now is, as much as I feel they're anti-capitalist, they might just be creating through their behavior a whole new generation through the millennials of capitalists. So we can only hope that we return back to the standards that America has been built on. And I really feel hopeful just talking to the younger folks and that they really are starting to wake up, Lou. So there is hope, and we just keep on praying.
When you talking about the millennials, I do want to re-mention that the contest that we are co-sponsoring with the NEPA Campaign for Liberty, the Northeast Pennsylvania Campaign for Liberty group. And that is a contest for high schools, Michael, a writing contest to write about the Constitution. And they could find all that information at muckrakernews.com, or certainly go to any of the independent Gazette sites, whether that's Pocono IG, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton IG, .coms, and that information is posted on our websites, and we're certainly going to be reaching out to the high schools and getting this message of freedom out to the younger generation, which is where it all starts. Certainly, that I like to say that message of Ron Paul and who really started the Campaign for Liberty. That's where it's all about, and just educating, and the more information they get, the better off you, me, everybody will be to make a logical and intelligent decision on where we need to go.
Right. And, Lou, when I think about the contest, and I think it's a wonderful idea, but really, isn't that the backbone of capitalism? Wow, I could put some work and some effort, and I can gain $100 if I win this thing. I'm thinking, so it does so many things. And this is really where I think in the core of our being that this is what we want. We just want the opportunity. Government, stay out of my way. I just want the opportunity to make it on my own, to make it as a family, to make it as a community. We don't need that large government breathing over our neck. And certainly some of the topics we'll be talking about is essentially government breathing over our necks, Lou, at so many levels of what's going on in our society today. So these are things that, again, we'll be talking about things that were unheard of even talking about just 10 years ago. And certainly I'm getting of the age that I can still remember 10 years ago, but still really, really being completely ignorant of what was going on. And yet what the young folks know now, I didn't know at the age of 40, Lou. So I really find that the awareness is really through movements like the Ron Paul movement. Though he was demonized and called a whack job and everything else, it's really starting to come that so many things that Ron Paul was talking about are really becoming more and more evident every day, isn't it, Lou?
Well, we find anybody that's out on the cutting edge is typically called some kind of or demeaned, however you want to see it. You see it now even in the libertarian circles. Michael, you certainly saw it as part of the Tea Party movement. When you are there for a change and a instrument of change for the powers to be, all of a sudden that is the first thing that happens. And at least that's when you're starting to have an influence, because I think there's that old saying, first people ignore you and then they demean you, and then you eventually make some kind of real change. And certainly we have seen that with the Tea Party movement in the last, not necessarily the congressional cycle anyway, where we started seeing some more Tea Party type individuals, constitutionalists, which I would like to think are getting elected.
They are, Lou. And I look, and you're right. I have experienced some of the wrath of being the Tea Party guy back in Northeast PA. And you hear all the negatives, like you're not standing by your principles. And in reality, Lou, the Tea Party is standing by its principles. It is standing by the Constitution, where you have so many of our politicians, those that protest to be into the conservative Republicans, who don't even really know what it means to be conservative, Lou. So you're right. Once you become, you're at that level of being demonized, you're realizing that you're making a real impact because they're fearful of losing their control. And so much of this, Lou, is about losing their control and power over their little part of the backyard they've etched out to be theirs. And this is really where we're seeing so many things, even in Pennsylvania. And I know we've kind of stalled with the Voters' Right Act, but I think that there are more people now aware of it than they certainly were before, and the impact that it makes on our society, Lou. So we really have to continue to push this, and those little voices, I believe, are becoming louder.
Boy, you just gave me a softball. You listen to Sanity. Check 888-577-4487. Michael, just before I respond to what you just said, I want to let our listeners know we try. We're on here for an hour every Saturday morning. We have been. We're into our third year right now, and we do jam an awful lot of subjects, and I have heard from a lot of different callers. Sometimes they back off from calling only because we go from one subject to the next subject relatively fast. And I tell them, listen, we'll adjust. Don't feel as though that you're breaking up our rhythm or anything else like that. So certainly you're welcome to call about any subject, and we'll certainly try to answer or get involved with it as much as possible. And that number is 888-577-4487. When you're talking about the Voter Choice Act, and you hear this, another thing, and you're probably hearing this, and to a certain extent, it's true at this point. Certainly here in Pennsylvania, the real fight is going to be in the primaries. Why? That's what I say. Why? Why should it only be the primaries? Why do I have to join a club? Why do you have to join a club? Why do you have to join the Rotary Club to be able to participate on who you want to see on the ballot? And that's what we have here in Pennsylvania. The Republicans and the Democrats have put themselves in a position to keep voice squashed, to keep the independent voice squashed. We are on this every day and during the week, Michael, and certainly we're going to be writing a story in the Independent Gazette on the Voter Choice Act. But I have a quote here from Senator Andrew Dinniman. He is on the committee, the state committee in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, that controls what comes out of that committee, or he doesn't really control it. Who really controls it is Senator Smucker, like we said last time, and actually the Republican, establishment, the Pilegis, the Scarnettis. Well, this is what he said. He says, no one will give up power willingly. It is in the interest of both parties. And he happens to be a Democrat, but he's saying, he told me at length, we had a very lengthy conversation that both parties, it's in their interest to keep the status quo. They don't want to give up the advantage. Opening up the process is what democracy should be all about. And I got to agree with them. And why? Why do we accept this? Why, if you're listening to a sound of our voice, why are we accepting the fact that they just, it's just said offhandedly sometimes, Michael. Oh, well, it'll change sometime. Maybe, that's the way it is. We are in the place we are now because that is the way it has been, and the only way we change it is by getting involved. And he actually left me with a quote, and it was a Margaret Reed quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Michael, that's why we started the Independent Gazette. That's why we come up here on Saturday mornings. The more we get people engaged, why we go to these events that we do, why we're covering the events, and we encourage people to get involved. Michael, this past week, I think it was 3 or 4 new press passes. Folks that we have talked to out there saying, you know what? I want to go cover something. I want to find out what's happening up in Carbondale. I mean, this is fantastic. Citizen journalists.
It really is, and the thing that's fantastic is that people are excited to get involved because they really feel that they have some, that they're empowered. And we had talked about the empowerment of the press pass in the past.
Yes.
Because, you walk in, just with my experience when Catherine Sebelius was in San Antonio, you walk in with the press pass and you really, really are treated much different than as if you were just a normal citizen. Unfortunate, I believe, but you are treated differently. You're treated with respect, and you're really, they put the kid gloves on to make sure that you're comfortable, that where you want to be, and they're afraid of, even though we have such a controlled media right now nationally, they are still afraid of, and the questions were, I wasn't quite sure who was the press, like, well, where are you from? You're from we're in the Independent Gazette. What are you doing all the way from the Northeast? So the questions were very almost like, well, how do we need to treat this fella? Do we go on the attack, or do we just... So they chose to make that situation where they were just going to be cordial, and they were cordial, and I think most of the time they are cordial. But it's really empowering folks to get out there and have that media that has an alternative point of view. It's called the truth, Lou.
Yeah, when you talk about a controlled media, X will be joining us very shortly. He's going to be talking about the turnkey tyranny system that is in place. I'm going to just leave you with this note, Michael, before we go to break. 1988, and the reason I bring this up is that you had mentioned here at the beginning of the show that anything that government seems to touch doesn't seem to work. Last week, I did want to touch on the war on poverty, but I'll just leave you with this quote at the moment, and perhaps maybe somewhere during the show we'll be able to get to it. But in 1988, President Ronald Reagan noted in his State of the Union address, "We waged a war on poverty, and poverty won." On that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back. You're listening to Sanity Check, 94.3 FM, The Talker.
Sanity Check with Tea Party Mike, Libertarian Lou, Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM, The Talker.
Listen to the word I say.
Hey!
The screams all sound the same. For the truth may vary this. Shit will carry out bodies safe to show.
And 94.3 FM, The Talker. This is Sanity Check, Libertarian Lou, Tea Party Mike. We do have Mr. X on the phone. Michael, we posted Mr. X's article that just recently appeared in Breitbart, and he covered for the Independent Gazette. Obama, worse than Bush on civil liberties. The emperor has no clothes. This is a hard-hitting piece, Mr. X. We loved it. It is on Muckraker News, if you're listening out there right now, and we're going to be putting it out to our groups, and certainly if you wish to start getting some of our email blasts, you could go to Muckraker News and subscribe to our daily, pretty soon daily, Michael, update newscast. But Obama worse than Bush on civil liberties. Mr. X, you and me talked at length last night. You were on fire. This really got under your skin. Tell us what happened. Tell us what happened at the National Press Club. Educate us.
The foremost expert in the country is a person by the name of James Bamford. He is the go-to person when people want to understand what's going on with America's secret organizations. He's been writing about this for well over 25 years. And he gave a presentation at the National Press Club describing how out of control our surveillance state has become, all in the names of protecting national security and going after the boogeyman of terrorism, so that this bloated government agencies of multiple alphabet soup type names can spread out across the country and violate the civil liberties of the average American. Now, this is not to say that there are not dangers. This is not to say that, we do not need to take, steps to correct for, legitimate things that are out there. It's just that, when you have an agency that gets to a certain size and you're a hammer, everything around you starts to look like a nail. So at the end of his presentation, I specifically went up to him and addressed him with a question, asking him, is the present administration worse than the previous? And to which he replied, yes, the Obama administration is worse than the Bush administration. And one of his things was primarily because of the distinct war against whistleblowers. Now, the thing that had come up over and over and over again throughout this entire Obama administration is that when someone wants to come out and point out constitutional violations by these organizations, in the past they were essentially destroyed. You could look up and see what some of the effects of how people who have tried to do the right thing have been persecuted by our own government. And, you ask yourself, well, why would somebody like Edward Snowden flee the country? The answer is only an insane person would stay behind, because there are no protections for whistleblowers, despite what the government says. And with the new NDAA provisions that are there, for all you know, the government would have labeled somebody like Snowden a terrorist and taken away his constitutional protections. I mean, they could have black-bagged him, taken him off to some site, held him indefinitely. You would have never heard from him again.
Yeah, you're down in Guantanamo.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what the final destination is when you have thousands of people and billions of dollars being spent on an industry that can be upended if we actually followed the Constitution. So the song and dance that Obama came out with yesterday is nothing but a song and dance, because the real heart of the matter is the only reason, in my opinion, that the president is doing what he is doing today is a few weeks ago, actually I think it's a couple months now, he had a big powwow with the heads of all of the tech companies to specifically address the concerns that are out there. And what is going on now is the big companies like Google and Microsoft and
Cisco
are now at risk of losing billions and billions of dollars because foreign countries do not want to introduce their upgraded servers and software and so forth because they're afraid that within the coding mechanisms and within the tech instruments themselves are backdoors to allow the NSA in. You know, when we heard about, Angela Merkel's phone being hacked and so forth, look, if they're hacking Angela Merkel's phone and she's head of Germany, I'm not saying that the U.S. shouldn't be doing spying activities, okay? But the idea that somehow the tech companies are complacent and going along with this is going to cause a drastic price differential between what other countries are willing to pay or not pay for technology products. So this is the real reason Obama is doing this. Obama is not doing this because he cares about the individual Americans' civil liberty protections. That's just not true. It's interesting, though, when they have the psychological terms, usually when you sit down with a therapist and the therapist asks you about your problems, usually the first one or two things you spout off usually aren't the main things. To really get to the heart of it, usually it's answers 3, 4, and 5 out of a person's mouth that is the real heart of the matter. It's what's really bothering you or what the real focus is. It's the same thing with the president. He comes out and he talks about the individual public and this and that, and then later on he starts to talk about the technology companies. And that's the ding, ding, ding moment where you should say to yourself, now we know what's really going on here. He was getting pushback from these large industries.
X, let me just throw this out here, and I want to get some of this information out there. I have in front of me for immediate release. This is coming from former Governor Gary Johnson. The president's proposals are disappointing but not surprising, talking about the NSA reforms. It is simply not realistic to expect the federal government to voluntarily relinquish powers it has granted itself, even when those powers may be unconstitutional. And when the government has convinced itself that it's okay to sweep up the phone calls, the texts, the emails of hundreds of millions of Americans, it is no surprise that the president is not really proposing to change anything. Even if the president proposed reforms are adopted, we will still have a government that has access to our most personal data, needing only the blessing of a secret court to use that data however it wishes. This is not a protection that satisfies the Fourth Amendment prohibition of unreasonable searches. The government and its agencies will not rein themselves in, and neither will Congress, unless the American people demand it at the polls, at the grassroots, at the public square. This was Gary Johnson. And, of course, I just want to take a shot, Michael, at that phony presidential debate commission. Sponsored by Budweiser and Southwest Airlines, by the way. This debate commission is really a 501(c) corporation, and they are there to keep these voices, keep the voices of somebody like Gary Johnson out of the debates. If you're listening to us, you didn't hear much of Gary Johnson, even though he ran for president. He was not allowed to be in the debates. Why? Because going hand in hand with a phony presidential debate commission and this controlled media, we don't get to hear alternative voices or alternative solutions to our problems. Michael,
Lou, and this, I was listening to some of the experts on the news last night, and the intellect, Charles Krauthammer and the gang that were there. And they were missing the very, very point that this is not constitutional. And they were so okay with this information being stored somewhere else, which is even scarier than being stored at the NSA, in my opinion. Maybe it's going to be stored at Target. Who knows? But that was the
good one, Michael.
Thank you. But the issue here is that they're missing the point that it's not constitutional, and they are willing to give up our constitutional rights in the name of Security X, and I'm not buying it. If I don't have my freedom, the security means nothing to me.
And Michael, and this is one of the things that James Banford went over specifically at the presentation at the National Press Club. He described numerous programs and operations that are being put into place whereby if you were to objectively evaluate, would these programs have prevented 9/11? Have we prevented terrorist attacks? And you remember a number of, probably about a year ago or so, they were talking about, they were trying to cite some 50-something terrorist events that were stopped because of the metadata phone program and stuff. And then actually what happened was when they finally drilled through the information, the answer was 0 terrorist things have been prevented from this particular method of surveillance. And you ask yourself, so let me get this straight. How much money are you spending? How much money are you paying the possibly thousands of people that are employed within these agencies that are doing nothing but really, not adding or securing our state, which is your prime argument for why you have these programs in place? And this is the real litmus test. If within, let's say, we'll be realistic because it's the government, but let's see within 18 months. Okay, now I don't want to wait that long, but this is the way the government works. Let's see if within 18 months you hear of mass layoffs and drastic budget cuts all around all of these areas like Fort Meade and so forth, because all of these high-priced people, remember, everybody working in these industries is probably being paid 2 times more than what they would for a comparable job in the private sector. You need to hear it, that nothing is changing. That is your litmus test. Unless you hear about the massive layoffs, unless you hear about the dollars being cut, then you know that nothing has changed. Because what they're probably just going to do is they're going to recode things through a semantics. So maybe it's not metadata they're going to collect. They'll give it some new name so that they could say, well, we're not doing that. Just like, they take the word food stamps and they want to relabel it SNAP program. So a person can go, I'm not on food stamps, but you are on food stamps. They've just changed the name. Now there's somebody that wanted to take, I forgot who it was, they wanted to get rid of the word welfare and change it with something transitional assistance program or something like that. Another one of these semantics, right out of George Orwell's 1984 doublespeak sort of concepts, whereby you're trying to fool the public because once they get wise to something, they demand to change. So what do? Change the name instead of changing the program.
Hey, wait a minute, X. What can we change the name of the Federal Reserve? Does that help us change the program?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep that.
Hey guys, you're bringing up such great topics here, but we're going to need to take a break. Michael, you brought up about the Constitution. The Constitution is there. Those words not need to be parsed. Either the Constitution means what it says or it doesn't. And even though I've said these words, this is coming from Judge Andrew Napolitano. I was reading or starting to read a book that he has recently written. Unbelievable. But we need to take a break. X, when we come back, stay on the line. This is an important subject.
So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older.
When I'm wiser and older. I'm getting older. I don't know about wiser. Jenkins, right in. Michael, right off the bat, he has to jump right in. Wiser? He shakes his head. You're listening to Sanity Check, 94.3 FM The Talker, 888-577-4487, 888-577-4487. Boy, I got to tell you, there's so much to talk about here. I do want to remind folks that you can go to muckrakernews.com. Your article is posted up there. It's on our front page. The status quo crowd will fiddle away as Rome burns, cooking in a pot with the rest of the frogs around them, while our liberties are taken away from us. They and their type, Obama, Reid, Pelosi, Clinton, McCain, Graham, and even Romney, argue that it is for your own good and that they know what's best. Ain't that about right?
Oh, we're back to this point. Let's just all say the words together and not let anybody get us off topic whenever you're having a discussion. Obama is worse on protecting American civil liberties than Bush ever was, and Bush was horrible. I was on the Alan Combs show on Fox News as well as the Mark Thompson show, Make It Plain, on Sirius. And both of them refuse to admit this fact. If you get them and you go through and you list the facts, they will try to twist and get themselves out of a corner that Obama has painted them into, because they just cannot accept the fact that their guy has been such a blatant violator of the Constitution.
Hey, Michael, X has been on a rant. He's been in all the lefty shows and calling him about this. You name the show, he's been on it, and it's great. The Independent Gazette, Muckraker News, X. You're getting us a name out there for sure.
Well, that's the thing that I hope everyone leaves here with is, if they do encounter anybody and they're having a conversation about the president, no matter what his other policies are, they have to be objective, and that's really what we're talking about here. The only thing we're committed to is the truth. And the truth is Obama is worse. And this is how much we have gone. Remember, the government has suspended constitutional protections for American citizens. They will now kill you without a trial and a jury, and they can hold you indefinitely. And remember, once you go down this road, I don't care if you put Mother Teresa, so to speak, in charge of everything. It's not just how that person behaves now, but I don't know what Obama's mental state will be 6 months from now. I don't even know who's going to replace Obama, because, again, what's happened is they keep building upon their predecessor, so that you wake up one day and you end up with, thousands and thousands of executive orders, which are originally designed just to be supplemental provisions, so that, the president can change, the linen and the China patterns in the White House now become dictates in case of there's a national emergency that have not gone through congressional approval.
X, when you're talking about they keep building on stuff, Michael, I'll get you here in a moment, but talking about the book by Judge Napolitano, Theodore and Wilson, that's exactly what he was saying, and he was saying that we have gotten to this point because of the people, the Republicans and Democrats that we have put into office. And I'm reading this, Theodore Roosevelt, and that's who he's talking about this. It was his policies and Wilson's policies that brought us, the Federal Reserve, the income tax, and it went on and on and on. And his whole point was that, the two parties have gotten this exactly the problem that we're in today, Michael. When X just brought up about NDAA, that was one of our concerns about our local congressman here voting for it. And, do you remember bringing this up, Mike? I don't even know how long ago it was. And people say, you guys, you guys are off base here, but here it comes back. Everything that we talk about is coming home to roost. Go ahead, Michael.
It is, one of the things, and I bought into the Patriot Act, guys. I'll admit to it until I realized what it was.
Well, how can you be against the Patriot Act?
Yeah, right. And but when I look at it, here's what the federal government is offering me: security versus freedom. And I look at that. I'm secure in my jail cell, but I prefer to be out walking the streets and forging my own way in the risk that I might be hit with a car. And this is what the federal government is offering me: security versus freedom. I'll take freedom every time, X. Freedom every time.
Michael, why don't we go to the prisons and ask all of them how secure they feel in there, because they're not in danger of being harmed by terrorism. Do they sleep better at night in their jail cells, knowing that Osama bin Ladens of the world have no chance of hurting them? You know, as they're sitting there being watched with the cameras behind the jail cells. You know, this is the distraction which they've used to convince somebody in the middle of Iowa, for Christ's sake, that they're at risk of a terrorist attack. I mean, last year, the total number of Americans killed by terrorists was a whopping 18 or 19 people, I believe. You know, the odds of you dying from probably hitting a deer on the way home in your car are probably higher.
Or walking the streets of Chicago.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. And I'm not talking about the entire city. You could probably just go walk in, like, an 8-block radius and be within that type of danger. But the distinction we need to make here, and this is what you brought up earlier, Lou, which is incredibly important. How would the national debate have changed if during the debates,
yes,
not just a year ago, but 5 years ago, you had, and think about this, you had Gary Johnson of the Libertarians and you had Jill Stein of the Green Party. What would have happened had those two other individuals, who do have differing viewpoints, but do agree on one fundamental thing, which is that we are in a police state today, and are moving further and further. If they had been on the stage and confronted Obama about his failures, see, because that would just blow up the entire dialogue.
And
But, of course, you could never have that take place, because then it would question the entire power structure that's in place. And remember, both political parties in their primaries earlier did have members like Ron Paul, Gary Johnson, and others, even those on the left like Dennis Kucinich, that had brought up these items for discussion but were labeled as out of the mainstream of American society. Well, you know what? I don't really think those views that they're expressing are out of the mainstream of society. The out of the mainstream are the people like the Lindsey Grahams, the John McCains, the Nancy Pelosi's, who are in favor of continuing these policies. And what really stood out, though, remember, was during the Amash Amendment, we saw how everyone lined up. It wasn't Republican versus Democrats. It was long-term establishment types in both parties in favor of this surveillance state, and all of the newcomers to Congress who it may be they're not there long enough to be compromised by the way the system works.
Well, you got that right. One of the other parts of the story that you have, or we have posted, and part of your article X, and once again, it's on muckrakernews.com. You brought up the whole church commission, Michael. We have certainly brought that up, Operation Mockingbird, and you say here, James Bamford explained that the existing situation has grown so bad since the church warning that we have what amounts to a turnkey tyranny system in place. Tell us about that, X. I mean, once again, this is scary stuff.
Well, we're back to this position whereby we try to look at what happened in the past. We try to look at, what was out there that could have caused a differential for us to maybe follow a different path to protect our country and our constitutional protections. So the Church Commission was set up in the 1970s,
yep,
whereby they went through and were looking at all of the crazy programs that our government was doing, in part due to the Watergate scandal. And he made a stern warning that, he was worried that the system has gotten so bad that, now this is 1975 where he's talking, if the pattern continues, we will find ourselves waking up one morning with the ability of a tyranny or a tyrannical government being able to step in to place without there being any way for the public to fight back against it. And so in speaking with Bamford after his press talk, he used the word, we have in place a turnkey tyranny. It's not that there's a tyranny existing today, but it is very, very easy for the government to institute a tyranny, given the situation of what they are doing today with the NSA and the other elements of the government, so that if they wanted to, if the wrong person gets in charge, if somebody has a change of heart, they could institute this very easily. Now, the thing is, this is where the people on the left do not understand what really is at the heart of the Second Amendment. This is where these gun arguments completely fail. If I'm telling you that the government at any moment, if it wanted to, could go completely rogue and the American public would have no way to organize itself and fight back because they could immediately collect lists. Lou starts to counter this by putting out an email blast. Guess what? They know everybody who's on the list. They know everything that you're talking about. So this is what the Second Amendment's about. It's never about hunting. Okay.
No.
It's about the fact that in my house, I will want to have a rifle that maybe even if I had to would be put behind a piece of glass that says, in case of emergency of the tyrannical government, break this so that you can stop this from taking place.
Part of
That's what this is all about.
Part of what you said there, you says leftists have a blinding faith in government. As long as they're the ones in charge, which prevents them from understanding what a disarmed public truly means. And that's it, Michael. I mean, it really is. You hear people coming out this past week, they're going to put out movies coming after the NRA and all these other things. This is really our last hope. I mean, we start losing our ability to stand up and fight. Surely they have won.
Well, Lou and X, when I hear some of the arguments from the folks on all this scandal with the NSA, well, in 30 years, no one's ever been harmed by this. How do we know that? I have such a distrust for our government right now that how do we know that someone hasn't been taken down because of this? Because we don't know. Edward Snowden, if he had stayed in, he may have been quieted quickly and pushed into some prison. We don't know. And yet the naiveness of some of these reporters to think that the government is telling us everything was just outstanding to me. I just can't believe that they would be expecting the American people to believe that the American government will come out and say, somebody tried to rat on us, but we threw them in jail. Of course they wouldn't tell you that. But this is what we're being led to believe, that we're going to put all this tyranny in place, but it's never harmed anyone. I don't buy it.
Listen,
and think about how bad it's gotten. It's gotten so bad that the whistleblowers, like the Edward Snowdens of the world, and probably people going forward, under the existing rules that are in place today, realize that it is suicide, not maybe physically, but from a lifetime standpoint, to come out and rat on the government will ensure your either physical death sentence or your lifetime death sentence by them being able to imprison you forever, so that you have to run off to places like Russia to try to try to protect the American public.
You're listening to Sanity Check, 888-577-4487. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of the rights of its citizens, it is the right of the people to alter it or abolish it. And make no mistake, our governments, the federal, the state, and local, have all become injurious to the rights of the citizens. Barack Obama today delivered a speech that promised next to nothing. He promised that the greatest safeguards for civil liberties will be enacted and that the steps will be taken to rein in the worst of the NSA surveillance abuses. But government cannot be reined in. Once it has power, it seeks more. Once it has information, it keeps it, and often tells us that it didn't keep it, such as the records of the gun purchasers run through the NICS system, even though it really did. And then it wants more. It is the nature of the beast, Michael. Everything it thinks it can use, it stuffs into its gaping, insatiable maw. There is really a list of safeguards, and they are mentioned specifically in the Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. It's not just a piece of paper. What other safeguards will be millions of bureaucracies from breaking the law? What will keep millions of bureaucracies from breaking the law further? And it goes on. That is the press release out of the Libertarian Party after Barack Obama's speech. We could talk about this for hours really today, and we're kind of winding down. We have to talk about some local issues. We have some people holding, but kind of sum it up for us. And I do want to let people know that you can go to Muckraker News and read a little bit more about what X is doing, and certainly what Mike and everybody else is doing at the Independent Gazette for that matter.
I just want everybody to be able to say this with a clean conscience and with full confidence. Barack Obama has been worse on civil liberties than Bush ever was, and Bush was horrible.
What was that
Like
again?
Anything that's going to come out. Again, Barack Obama is worse than Bush, and Bush was horrible. Anything that they're talking about, any of the solutions that they're talking about, remember what they're probably going to do is they're going to wind down the programs that really are not effective to them. You know, when Obama said the words, well, we're not going to do the metadata further than 2 people away instead of the 3 people, 3 stages of separation. Well, they probably know that they don't need to go farther than 3. 2 is more than enough to get the information that they want in terms of surveillancing you.
Well, Michael, we're going to take a break. X, thanks for calling. Interesting stuff. We'll talk to you next week, and certainly look forward to this article and many others in the Independent Gazette, the Scranton Independent Gazette, which will be coming out not this Monday, but the following Monday. This is Sanity Check. We will be back in a few.
Tea Party Mike, Libertarian Lou. Their Sanity Check. Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM, The Talker.
As we roll down this unfamiliar road, and although this wave is stringing us along, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
And that's it. Your home, 94.3 FM, The Talker, Sanity Check, Libertarian Lou, Tea Party Mike. And Michael, as much as I would love to stay on some of the national stuff, we got Gary Duncan on the line. He says all politics is local. I did ask him to give us an update on this Lackawanna Study Commission, what's happening with the commissioners here in Lackawanna, and really it's very much what's happening around the country. And in this past week, we're covering, certainly for the Independent Gazette, the Lackawanna Study Commission meetings. Gary Duncan has made most of them. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning. How's everybody at the station doing today in the snow?
We're doing good. Hopefully you're back safe and sound. I know you had to get out early this morning.
Yes, I did.
Just speaking with you at the study commission the other night, you brought up, and certainly we have brought up, and we have to make sure that people that are listening to the sounds of our voice, that not only do they have a home, they have the ability to get involved, to change stuff, and it has to come from the grassroots, and that's something that we want to always impress on people, Gary, is that all politics is really local. If you heard part of the segment before, obviously we were talking about our national stuff, but at the end of the day, very little we can do sometimes on our level, your level, on what happens nationally, and we have to depend on our elected officials to do that. But certainly here locally, we could have more of a voice, and that's certainly what we can do with the Lackawanna Study Commission.
I couldn't agree more. As we've discussed, Lou, this past week's meeting, which was held in German, they've discussed several of the things. They talked about the salaries of both the county exec as well as the members of the county council. They set term limits for those individuals, and then that was passed by the members of the current Government Study Commission.
Correct.
One of the bones of contention was the release of documentation, and there's a bone of contention between the county council and its chairman and the sitting commissioners of the county of Lackawanna. And the reason for the vote of contention is the county council members have requested the release of county contracts. Their concerns, as expressed by the chairman and by members of the council at the meeting in German, was that they had some questions about current contracts, which are still held from folks that dealt with the former commissioners that are currently in prison.
Think about this, Michael. People listening. Gary, why? I mean, should this not be public knowledge? Should we not know who our government is doing business with? And it's amazing to me that, as far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the current batch of commissioners here in Lackawanna County refused to release this information, and the Lackawanna Study Commission had to hire had to hire their own investigator, a former FBI agent, to try to get the information. Am I got that right?
Lou, the way it pans out is this: in listening to both sides in this, and I always try to listen to both sides. The statements from the county government's offices that the requests were so voluminous that it would have been impossible for the current administration to grab all of the documentation. They're saying literally in the hundreds of thousands of pages, and get those documents out back to the study commission. There was a right to know order originally. The original right to know, Lou, was filed November the 15th.
Right.
And that's what the commissioners said, and that was discussed at the meeting. If we took, having taken notes at that meeting, then Attorney Ruggiero for the commission did more or less a revised right to know, which he then submitted December the 4th. Members of the commission stated to date they haven't received any of the documents.
Right, and that to me, I think speaks volumes to what's going on here. We certainly have a history of this nepotism, the cronyism here in Northeast Pennsylvania. Michael, you're well aware of it. Well, I'm well aware of it, and Gary, I'm sure I know you're well aware of it. And certainly when we have elected officials say that they can't get us the information. I think you brought up the fact that even the minority commissioner, you have a little, you're questioning him also, only because you would think that maybe he should be able to step up and help, and it's starting to throw a little cloud over what he's doing also. Well,
I think the question is this. People are concerned about, and it's not just Lackawanna County, well, I think it's everywhere. People are concerned about government, and the slogan of pretty much the last 5 years has been transparency, and people are looking for that transparency. And I think when there's a question about the transparency of government, the cynicism creeps in, and then we wind up with a 33% electoral turnout and voter apathy. And I think there's the concerns. Absolutely. Gary, we're already running out of time here, and so I thanks for checking in, but I think this is going to be the story in Northeast Pennsylvania. I think this is one of the top stories throughout the election season. I would love for you to just keep checking in, give us a little update on what's going on. You head up to Dunmore Neighborhood Watch, I know that, so I appreciate your time. I'll give you a little bit more time next week to keep us updated, because this is the story, and it just doesn't affect Lackawanna County. It really has a lot of other tentacles. So thanks for calling in, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you, Lou. You betcha. Michael, we're down. It's unbelievable. We're down.
Wow.
I know. Wow is right. I want to remind folks that they can go to muckrakernews.com if you want to get involved with us. You could, I believe the link is there now, or it's going to go up shortly, to get on, our email list. We're going to be talking about stuff that you're covering, that X is covering. John DiLiberto's out in Long Island today. We have a lot of citizen journalists out there. They're getting involved. We're going to, if you want to get involved, if you want to do things. I know Gary from out our way is calling state representatives, asking about their debt, calling our congressional representatives. Michael, we got down to 30 seconds. As always, you got it, Michael. Folks, have a great weekend.
Hey, God bless all.
God bless everybody. See you next week.